The Holy Gospel according to John, the 9th chapter. As Jesus walked along, he saw a man who was blind from birth. Jesus' disciples asked, "Rabbi, who sinned so that he was born blind, this man or his parents?" Jesus answered, "Neither he nor his parents. This happened so that God's mighty works might be displayed in him. While it's daytime, we must do the works of him who sent me. Night is coming when no one can work. While I'm in the world, I am the light of the world." After he said this, he spit on the ground, made mud with the saliva, and smeared the mud on the man's eyes. Jesus said to him, "Go, wash in the pool of Siloam." This word means sent. So the man went away and washed. When he returned, he could see. The man's neighbors and those who used to see him when he was a beggar said, "Isn't this the man who used to sit and beg?" Some said, "It is." And others said, "No, it's someone who looks like him." But the man said, "Yes, it's me." So they asked him, "How are you now able to see?" He answered, "The man they called Jesus made mud, smeared it on my eyes, and said, 'Go to the pool of Siloam and wash.' So I went and washed, and then I could see." The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, O Christ.
Please be seated. So until this week, as I was thinking about this theme of loneliness, I don't think I'd ever really paid attention to how many songs there are about being lonely, right? There's "Only the Lonely" by Roy Orbison, "Are You Lonesome Tonight" by Elvis, "I'm So Lonesome I Could Cry" by Hank Williams. For those who, remember the 70s, "All by Myself" by Eric Carmen, that one. In the 80s, right, you had "Here I Go Again on My Own" by Whitesnake. Any Whitesnake fans here? Or "Owner of a Lonely Heart" by Yes. I don't know, and any others coming to mind for folks? What's that one? I thought I heard something.
"I'm so lonesome I could cry."
Yes. Yeah, I kind of stopped at the 80s. I know for this, my musical taste in this crowd, probably, I don't know too many of the more recent ones, but I'm sure there are many, right? Because loneliness, that feeling of I'm the only one, that is a universal experience. It's been around as long as there have been humans. And so it makes sense, right, that there are all these songs about this theme that cross musical genres too, right? And probably the reason why they're so enduring, right? There's something powerful about listening to these kinds of songs when we're feeling lonely, right? When we feel lonely, we often feel like we are the only one. So to hear someone else, express that same feeling has the power to make us feel maybe a little bit less alone, right? That we're not alone in our loneliness. I imagine that the main character of our Bible story today is someone who knew a thing or two about being lonely. We don't know many details about his life, right? We don't even know his name, this man who we're told that was born blind. We do know, though, that unlike a lot of people, and most of the ones that we hear about in the Bible with these stories of Jesus healing, unlike most of them, he didn't actually come to Jesus asking to be healed. Jesus just sees him, right, and decides But this is a moment where he's going to use this man as an opportunity to demonstrate God's power, right? This man is there minding his own business, and I just can't even imagine what this must have been like for him, right? Jesus spits in the dirt, makes mud, and then puts it on this poor guy's eyes, right? And tells him to go and wash it off in the pool of Siloam. And of course, what's he going to do? He got mud all over his face. He needs to wash it off. So he goes, hopefully this pool wasn't too far away. He goes to wash his face. He follows Jesus' instructions. And as soon as the mud is off, he suddenly is able to see for the very first time in his life. He hadn't asked for this, but it's a gift that he was given. Right? He goes back home to share the news with his community, only to have his neighbors start arguing about his identity. Right? Is this the man that we know, that we're used to seeing him begging on the side of the road, or is it somebody else? They don't know, right? There's this argument. And I think for me, it's that moment, right, after the healing that gives us a glimpse into some of the aloneness, the loneliness that he must have had in his life, right? It's clear that when he was blind, a lot of people really didn't pay him any mind, right? Otherwise, they would have recognized him. Like, it's not like his face changed. He didn't have plastic surgery or something. It's just that he was able to see, right? But he's not recognized by so many of those who should recognize him. Now that he can see, too, right, rather than people celebrating with him, they just have this argument about who he is, right? There's a real sense that he is the odd one out, that he's by himself on his own. Now, we didn't read the whole of this story this morning. This passage is about 40-some verses, and I know my voice probably wouldn't have been able to handle that this morning anyways. But if you know this story, if you read on in John's Gospel, you see that they even end up driving this poor man out when they just can't figure this out. They're angry about what's happened, not really understanding, who Jesus is, how could this have happened, and they make him the target of their fear and their anger, and they drive him out of the community. So much for this gift opening up maybe a better chapter in this man's life, right? He gains his sight, but he ends up being rejected by his community, even more alone than he was before. Now, this story is about a particular kind of loneliness, about somebody being made the target or scapegoat for a community's fear or anger or confusion. That's a particularly painful and acute experience of loneliness, and it's possible that some of you have experienced that in your life too. That's not, sadly, an uncommon or an unusual experience. But it's not the only experience of loneliness, right? When we look at our lived experiences of times when we felt lonely, those reasons, they vary, right? For some, it's social anxiety, or it's the burdens that we shoulder that keep us locked out from others, right? We maybe put up walls that we don't want to let others in, or we don't feel that we can. Mental health, caregiving requirements, demanding schedules, sometimes our own sickness or disease, right? We know that sometimes it's possible to be in a room full of people and still feel alone, or to feel alone in our marriage or in our family, to feel alone because we worry people won't accept us for who we are. There are a lot of reasons for feeling lonely, perhaps as many reasons as there are people in the world, right? Because our stories are all our own. Loneliness is something, though, that we really is really pervasive in our culture, right? We live in a world where we are really isolated from one another, and of course, the pandemic just made that so much worse, right? When it wasn't safe to be together, we were forced to be alone, and we really felt that sense of isolation and loneliness so much more deeply. And we still, I think, we are experiencing the ripples of that now, right? Maybe you feel that for yourself, or we see that, right, in others. Not really sure about being around other people or feeling safe anymore to be around other people. And the sad part about being isolated, being apart from others, is that this also means we end up being cut off from any help or compassion that others could give us, right, if we weren't isolated. And that's why I'm so thankful that in this story, the part that we didn't read, but if you read on, after the man is thrown out of his community, Jesus seeks him out again. Jesus comes back to find him. Because the man was blind, right, the first time he met Jesus, he doesn't know what Jesus looks like, but Jesus comes and finds him. Jesus makes sure that he knows he's not forgotten, that he's not alone, and that he understands this gift of healing wasn't just about receiving physical sight, but it was about spiritual sight as well. The story wraps up pretty quickly, right? We don't get to know the ending to his story. We don't find out if he was ever reconciled with his community, whether he wanted to be reconciled with them. What we do know is that when Jesus comes to him, when he meets Jesus again for real, right, this second time, when he sees Jesus, well, he worships him, right? He receives Jesus as the Messiah, as the Savior, and he worships him. So whether he returns home again or not, he knows that he always has a home with Jesus. And that same promise is made to each one of us. Even when we are isolated from others, for whatever reason, even when we feel alone, we can trust that we are in fact never alone. That we always, each one of us, has a home with God. Right? God, our good shepherd, has promised to be with us in every single moment of life, to walk with us, to share in our laughter and in our tears, to hold us close in times when we're hurting, to lead us along safe paths. And as Christ's beloved community, as the church, the hope is that we can be this same kind of home for one another, right? That we can be a place where fears can be shared, hurts can be held, and joys can be celebrated. A place where we can be ourselves and be loved and accepted for that. For the church to be a place where we can belong. And we don't always get it right as the church, right? And I think the hard part is because it's the church, we sometimes have an expectation that we'll somehow be different or better at this. That's the hope, but the reality is, and I think a lot of us have unfortunately experienced this too, right? That we can be hurt at church too by people at church because we are imperfect, broken people, right? That is the reality. It's unfortunate. We can hurt and disappoint one another here too. The hope is that we strive to reconcile when that happens, right? To live honestly together, to talk things out, and to keep working at creating that space where it is safe to be vulnerable, to be open with one another, and that sense that we really can feel like we belong, and that it's worth keeping on trying to belong here to this community. So if you're feeling lonely today, I wonder if you could be brave and maybe reach out to someone to say hi. I think chances are they'll appreciate connecting with you too. Or if you're maybe not feeling lonely, but you have had someone that's been on your mind for a while, you've been meaning to reach out to them, maybe today is the day to do that too, to finally make that overture, to make that connection with someone. Because the truth is we were never meant to do this alone, right? We need one another to bear the burdens and to share in the joys, the big ones, but also the small ones, the ordinary ones. There will always be times in life when we feel alone, but we can trust that God, our good shepherd, God who is faithful and steadfast, is always with us. And that's why we say, blessed are those who feel alone, because we know the truth that no matter how lonely we may feel, we can be sure that God never ever leaves our side. Amen. I invite us to stand as we are able, as we sing our hymn of the day, number 782, My Shepherd, You Supply My Need.